right, welcome back to the Mastering Risk podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the start of the tech AI apocalypse and what you can do about it in the job market. So sit back, grab yourself your favorite beverage. Let's get at her. Welcome back to the podcast. Listen, I just wanted to shout out to our sponsor for this week, Preparedness Labs Incorporated. They are a risk, resilience, and preparedness online education company. If you drop over to their website, www.preparednesslabs.ca, it's based on the Shopify platform, and they have offerings there for leaders, talking about building social capital and strong relationships in business, for families and individuals looking to adopt a prepared life and understand preparedness, and for business leaders looking how to understand and embrace risk management. In the end, it is non-apocalyptic, evidence-based risk, resilience, and preparedness education for rational and intelligent people. So drop over to preparednesslabs.ca. Now on with today's show. Let's go. Today, we really want to focus on what we've seen in the news today on Tuesday in October, that large swaths of layoffs are starting to happen. So what we want to do is break it down into two pieces. One, talk about how this is going to roll out, or how this will likely roll out across society and what it might influence you. And then to take a step back and say, okay, what can you do in your own little world, in your little box, in your little sandbox? What can you do to get ready for this apocalypse? What can you do to help you, your family, your community, your wider set of relationships with friends, your groups? How do we as a society navigate what looks like it's the edge of a very large tsunami of layoffs, but that it may not work out that way? So let's get into it. The first part is we saw tens of thousands of jobs being laid off at big tech companies. And this is how the experts have always believed that this potential apocalypse in the job market would roll out. It begins with the tech companies, always because they have the culture. They're not only the authors and creators, and they grow AI technology, but they understand its usefulness and what it can do. Separating that from the human capacity and the human part of it, where people lose jobs, families lose incomes, etc., companies in the tech sector understand that there are entire swaths of repetitive, what used to be called white-collar employment, that is quite easily replaced by generative AI and large language models in the repetitious nature of their job. In the support functions, AI can generate the tabular information and the data that can be given to management to make better and more informed decisions. Both of those functions can simultaneously happen while laying off tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of workers globally, and employing an AI technology to replace their work. Tech firms have that kind of culture. Their culture is based upon maximizing the benefit and value that you can create from the AI technology platform. But it's not because what people label them as evil. It's because the marketplace they're in, the ecosystem in which technology firms find themselves, is that competitive nature. Everyone is doing the same thing. So while in a tech culture, you may say, I think employing 10,000 people in data analyst role and data support role is a really good humanistic thing to do. Every one of your competitors are firing that whole employment class, are being let go. And if you don't jump on board that, then while you may take a higher ethical and moral position from your perspective of taking care of humans, you're out of a job, because your company is going to be market ineffective and you're not going to be a competitive firm in the marketplace, because labor is one of the highest costs for any firm. So the first place that firms want to go to find efficiencies is, how can I do the same amount of work, just the same amount of work, with less employees? How do I cut the cost of production? How do I cut the per unit cost of placing an item on a shelf? And the easiest picking in that has always been labor, because labor is simple. A layoff, we can take 5 jobs, combine them into 3. We can take 7 jobs, combine them into 4, and lay off part of our workforce and stay competitive. That's always been the language that we've heard, but that's the language of tech. They're creating the technology to be able to do this. So we always knew that the beginning of AI generative layoffs would occur in the tech sector. And we're starting to see it this week with Amazon, with other companies that are laying off a large swath of their employees. Perfectly understood. You can decide whether it's acceptable or not to you, but that would be the natural first step for this to occur. Now, the second part of it is generated those in firms or in markets with lower margins. So once the tech firms take hold and make the jockeying in positions they can, the next evolution is going to be in markets where we have low margins. So if you think of the grocery firm, if you think of some retail marketplaces where the margin may only be 1 or 2%. So, at a grocery store, and I used to work at a grocery store decades ago, our margin at the time was about 2%. So there was $2 of profit in every $100 sale. So it was so razor close with the margins that there's not a lot of leeway there. And those are the biggest markets next to look at the value of AI to bring it out. Now, we saw the problems and difficulties in retail when we put self-serve checkouts in. And a lot of companies have really curtailed that, canceled it altogether, or have it to require a lot more human supervision, because apparently the discounts at self-checkout are incredible. I mean, I go to the cashier, my groceries are $150. I go to the self-checkout, they're like $84. It's amazing the difference between the two. And so because of that large amount of theft, record levels of theft that was occurring at self-checkouts, a lot of companies have realized that. So if you look at the tech sector being the lead, which it is, they're not firing the front-end workforce. They're firing the back-end analytical workforce, the back-end office and strategy-based workforce at headquarters. And I think you'll start seeing that lean application happen in low-margin retail environments, not necessarily firing cashiers because they've seen that that's ineffective and actually likely costs them more money. But going after management staff, looking at, for example, supply chain operations, data analytics staff can be replaced by an AI, what they call an AI information control tower in supply chain management, can provide that data analysis, send out the queries, and then put the information in front of decision makers in the business about whether they want to become more lean, more agile, whatever way they're moving. But you're starting to see it in that type of marketplace where you have low margins. And those are generally heavily invested brick and mortar supply chain, or heavily invested brick and mortar companies, or companies that work in the food industry where there's a very tight margin. That's going to be the next. And again, that's likely to be the back end, not the customer facing coal face, because the customer facing portion of retail is a differentiator, right? So if I'm going to buy stuff online, I don't care what your retail presence looks like because it's irrelevant to me. But if I'm going to come into your store, other than the price point, which is reasonably competitive in most markets and most items, the difference is going to be the level of service I get, the level of attention I get, and the sense that I get as a customer, whether I belong here or whether I'm inconveniencing you by showing up. We've all seen that, right? You've gone into a store, you're looking, they have the item you want, you talk to an employee, and it sounds to you, and you get the gut feeling like, I'm really inconveniencing this person by being here, right? It seems to be unfortunate that I've shown up in their store today. And then you look at other service places where you get great service, and you're like, okay, these guys actually might have a price point that's 5% higher, but I value the service. And it's grounded in the psychological elements of acquisition. There's a lot of behavioral economics literature out there and research on the fact that we humans buy on emotion and we justify with logic later. That's why a lot of the neoclassical ideas coming out of the 1970s, 80s, and 90s were kind of dying on the floor of theory right now, because we used to believe that people acted in their own best interest, and that they made decisions at the margins, which means very little changes, micro amendments to their shopping behavior. That's been blown out of the water, and we understand that humans buy on emotion. And so that customer service value is incredible. So we will see a continued investment in the front end retail side of it to keep that service level up. But what you will see in the back end is a considerable onslaught against those that do work in headquarters, distribution centers, and that type of thing is likely to be the next. The third part of the AI apocalypse, or what people are calling it, that's not me, but I find it quite amusing, is going to be general adaptation or adoption of AI-related functions being done without humans. That's a cultural decision based upon the population. We've seen a couple retail movements where corporations have done something and they've faced considerable blowback from the population as being unpopular. What we don't know now, and there's a lot of theories about it, but we do not know is whether society is going to embrace corporations who hack and slash their workforce to increase shareholder value. Now, some of that has to be done because of the competitors are doing it in the back country and the back offices and in certain tech fields, as we've discussed. But the general adoption of this in society has to take hold with cultural acceptance. So I live in Canada. We have to decide in Canada whether we want to support companies that are adopting AI, making these significant changes, but accepting the fact that that means there's going to be large-scale layoffs. Or are we going to push back against companies that make these type of decisions, and we're not going to purchase their products, and we're going to look more towards companies who preserve? A prime example of this is I'm an author. I'm at the beginning stages of writing my first nonfiction book. I've written a couple of other books that are available for sale, but I'm starting my fiction book. Now, I am going on the belief that you as a consumer, when you're looking for your next novel in the genre you're interested in, that you're actually going to be certain or take steps to determine whether the author is a human or AI. Because I'm going to take about a year to write my book. I'm planning on launching it in December 2026. It takes about a year end to end to write the thing, to edit it, to do all of the work necessary. AI can do that in an afternoon. And they're going to create a pretty cool story. The question that us artists don't know, authors, I've got family members who are digital artists, we don't know whether you as a consumer will want to actively ensure that the product you're consuming in the digital market space was created by a human and not AI. If you do care, artists survive. If you don't care and you just want the best product, then artists are not going to be able to make an income, and you're going to see the number of people in the arts, in the cultural arts, just going away. Because digital art, if it's done by an AI, it may be better than anything a human could produce, but we're counting on you to say, I want the art that's hanging on the wall of my place or the book that I'm reading to have been created by a human mind. We're hoping that happens. We're not sure. That's part of the big unknown that's facing a lot of companies right now in full scale, all in, no holes barred AI adoption across all of their lines of business. Because they can make that investment and then have a catastrophic fail. We've seen cancel culture is gone after a number of companies and a number of influencers for things that they've said and done. So I believe, and based upon the research that I've done, there's going to be a little bit of time lag between, we have the early adopters, which are AI. which are tech firms that are naturally going to be the first adopters. We're then going to see it in the low margin industries. And then we're going to have a bit of a pause, because we're going to have the discussion of, in a general sense in our societies, how much of that do we want AI to own? How much of that do we want to be done in the background if it could? It's that old adage, just because I could, should I? And that's a discussion that's not answered today, but it's a cultural, total discussion we have to have, and I'm not sure out of the outcome. So that's what we think is happening. That's what's going to roll out in the very short period of time, and then a bit of pause. What can you do about it? You as an individual, what's within your capacity to address this AI onslaught? The first thing is that we always say is information. Understand, if you own the business, if you're an entrepreneur, a solo entrepreneur, that's one thing. But if you're an employee, understand what your corporate intent is. Ask the questions. Do the research. Investigate, because what you're trying to figure out is, number one, what your company thinks it, or what your company intends to do in the coming year when it comes to AI role adoption, and whether you sit in one of those roles, those back office, those cubicles, those repetitive advisory, policy making, data analytics type of office jobs. What is your corporate intent? What are they thinking of? You're trying to gather your intelligence to understand what that looks like. If you're a business owner and entrepreneur, you're doing the same thing, but you're doing it in the marketplace with the other business owners, conducting a scientific or non-scientific survey of the other players and the other actors in your market and in your space to determine what is the appetite, what is the general idea, what is the general direction that we think AI adoption is going to take within the industry I'm in. And it depends on your industry, right? And the second part is that market analysis will tell you a lot about your industry. So if you're an electrician who owns your own private electric company and you provide call service to homes, then AI has the potential to leverage your business. So, company software that can do all of the background work. You don't have to hire an accountant. You don't even have to hire a receptionist. There's AI programs now that will answer your call, take clients and book clients, and will do all of that without a human involved. But AI is not coming for your job. At least not now. We are generational away from having a robot electrician show up at people's front door. Less impactful, more a sense of how can I leverage AI as an entrepreneur to make all of that background stuff for me far more accessible to my clients and far more efficient, which means I don't have to hire employees. Or you're in the process of, for example, I'm a data analytics fan. Company, I hook into your data information off the internet, and I provide you some SEO optimization ideas, or I'm going to help you generate ads. I'm a marketing company. Those type of things are very dangerous arenas to be in right now, because all of that can be replaced by AI in today's technology. And even if it's not as good as you, it learns at a rate exponentially more than you do. We're nowhere near superintelligence. Superintelligence, for those who are kicking the idea around, is when AI is smarter than all humans in all domains of work. So any field, any idea in the world, AI is smarter than any and all humans in that field. We're a ways from that. But really understanding your position, either as an owner or as an employee, where your company sits in the market, and how ripe your market is for AI adoption and the potential replacement of roles and responsibilities within that. Understanding that gathers you information, and it gives you a good sense of the probability in the short term of having an impact. The one thing you can do about this, and we talk about it extent on our website at preparednesslabs.ca. We've got our free guide for how to adopt preparedness as a 4-step free of charge on our website. you've got to remember that there's 3 preparedness plans. We call it your trifecta of preparedness plans. The first 2 are about, shelter in place and evacuation in times of a disaster. The third one is about I'm fired. Now, we've said this on many recent podcast and video episodes, and we're just reiterating the point that it's your responsibility to know exactly and specifically what you're going to do when you're fired. Because everybody's going to leave the current job you're in. You're going to die, you're going to get fired, you're going to quit, you're going to retire. You will leave this job. Hopefully, the world lets you leave it at a time and place of your choosing, but that may not occur, especially in today's pressure from AI and other economic factors that are starting to slow down and head the economy towards recession. What exactly do you intend to do when you're fired? You come into the office, you're met by HR and security. On the other side of the turnstile, you're taken into a corner office. All your stuff from your desk is there. Your access to email and everything. They take your work phone. They give you a severance package and they send you back home. Done. It's all over. No notice. Or you simply get one of those calls that everybody records on their YouTube or their TikTok channels now, where they get fired and they record it. And I'm sorry, we're moving on. We're resizing. We're downsizing. We reorganize priorities. HR is really good at a whole bunch of names of this. So what I've written many times, you get your 24-hour pity party. Absolutely. Grab your friends, do whatever, have your cry fest. But then the next day you got to get up and get after it. And trying to figure out what you're going to do next the day after you get fired is absolutely not a strategy, right? It's a recipe for failure. If you want to be successful or increase the probability that you'll be successful, is having an actual strategy of this is the position I'm going to go to when I get fired. It's in this industry. It takes this months of training. It's likely to be, say, 2 months for me to get up and running, and therefore my emergency fund needs to be at least 2 months. We talk about in the book that I've written and across our podcast episodes that one of the things you need to do is financial freedom. Take control of your financial health. And one of it is to have an emergency fund. Now, I'm not a Dave Ramsey. I'm not going to tell you to have $1,000 or 6 months. I'm going to tell you that based upon the evidence, when you have a strategy of what you're going to go to next, it tells you how much time that you're likely going to be down without an income and that you need to replace it. I have over 20 plus years of supply chain management. We have something called a safety stock. We multiply our regular turnover by 1.5 to ensure that as you get spikes and crashes in inventory turnover, that you're never going to have an empty shelf. So if, for example, it took me my plan is 2 months to change from this job to what I'm going to go to next when I'm fired, then you multiply that by 1.5. I need 3 months of expenses. Now I know exactly the size of my emergency fund. Understanding that nobody wants to think about that, and the vast majority of people don't think about what happens when I get fired, what happens when my house burns down. But preparedness speaks to the work that you do left of bang. That means left of everything that happens. So we're worried about getting you ready so that when the bad day happens, because it will happen, you're executing a well thought out strategy and plan while everybody else is running around with their hair on fire trying to figure out what just happened. You're already moving down a determined path. You might want to be an electrician. You might want to start a carving business. You might want to start a digital an AI integration firm. Whatever it may be, whatever it is you want to go to next, make sure you know what that is. So to recap what we talked about today, we've seen thousands and tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands across the tech industry of job closings announced. That is expected to be the front end of the AI tsunami because of the cultural adaptation that's within that tech environment. It's then likely to move to the back offices of low margin and close margin businesses. And then we're likely to have a pause when we look at cultural acceptance. Is our culture going to accept large scale AI adoption and the necessary and follow-on layoffs, or are we going to push back against that and try to determine if there's a different way to do it? But from your perspective, understanding what, if you're an employee, what your business owner intends to do, what the AI potential framework looks like in the future, and whether you're in one of those high-risk roles, that any repetitive data analyst, if you plug your fingers on a keyboard in a cubicle, you're likely an easy target for AI. What does that world look like? Do a market analysis, understand the threat environment that you exist in from AI, and then do the one thing you can do that costs no money, requires no intervention, and you need no external help. What are you going to do when you get fired? What is your exact plan? How are you going to replace your income? Because the answer for that can't be, I'm going to update my CV and hand it out. Because welcome to the hundreds of thousands of other people that are doing that this week, thinking that updating your CV and handing it out is actually a strategy that will work. It's not. You need to know now exactly what you're going to do. Sit down, pick up your favorite beverage, pour it on a Sunday morning, get out a nice scribbler, sit down with a pen, and figure out what your next step is. Doesn't cost any money. Totally simple, totally free, and it can change your stress and anxiety level about AI adoption. So thanks for joining us again at Mastering Risk. We appreciate your feedback. Drop us a line at jeff@preparednesslabs.ca. Drop over to our website at www.preparednesslabs.ca. Check out everything there. We have a whole bunch of free material available for you. Take care.